In the ancient world, you're either being laughed at or you're laughing with a peer. There is no other way. If you are below in a social hierarchy, you are being laughed at. And this is one of the reasons why so many high status writers of antiquity hate actors, because actors place themselves in that lower position to be laughed at, and to basically receive abuse professionally and by choice, right? And so there's not really a sense of like a way to make people laugh that does not harm oneself, right? If I'm making you laugh, I am facing abuse from your laughter, right? But there is some discussion of like shared cooperative laughter among peers. It is just extremely rare.
Hello and welcome to It Means What It Means, the podcast in which a guy with some college and a day job has long-form conversations about biblical texts. Today's guest is Tommy Woodward. This is a fun and silly conversation. We get into humor theory, and so we end up talking about things that make us laugh and things that we enjoy. So normally I share opinions at the end, but there's not a ton to wrap up on this one, I don't think. So I think I can put on the front end, Terry Pratchett comes up in this episode, and since the interview, I finished the book, The Hogfather. And it reminded me of a thing that I've noticed about Terry Pratchett, that in his humor there is and I think I use the word humanity in this conversation, but there is a depth and an introspection and a level of consideration given to things that are all around us and right in our faces. That is one of the things that I really appreciate most about Terry Pratchett's writing, particularly death. I couldn't say for sure if death is in every Discworld book. He might be. But death is certainly a recurring character throughout the, I believe it's 36 books in the 36 books of the Discworld series. And death seems frightening, but has this appreciation and perspective on humanity and in human beings, particularly as they create stories and narrative, that I really, really do love. So Tommy mentioned Terry Pratchett. He mentioned Small Gods, which Adrian Tchaikovsky also mentioned in our conversation. And so that book is a really good nexus. You don't have to read Discworld books in any particular order. It is fun to start with the introduction in The Color of Magic, but if you read Small Gods, as that has come as a recommendation from at least two of the people I've interviewed on here, or The Hogfather, which I think has a very interesting twist in the way that the story is set up. But there's also 2006 made-for-TV version. I believe it's 3 episodes. I watched it a couple of weeks ago. It's available on Peacock. And they did a really good job, I think, of getting the message of what he's saying out there. Other than that, if you have feedback, guest suggestions, maybe you want to tell me what you think is funny. Maybe there's a humor theorist out there that you think I would benefit from talking to. Hit me up at itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. All one word, itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. You can also follow me and comment and tag me in things on all the different social media platforms that are out there. You can leave reviews and rate and subscribe wherever it is that you're listening right now. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Audible, whatever. Or if you're really interested in what I'm doing here and you want to try and help and support, you can become a supporter on Patreon for $5 a month. And, the more $5 contributions I get every month, the closer I will be able to come to doing this full time. And I think I will get more of an opportunity to incorporate new things, maybe plan how these things come out instead of just catch as catch can with guest booking. Yeah, I think that's it. Enjoy my conversation with Tommy Woodward. Tommy Woodward, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get going, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Tommy. I'm a scholar of ancient Judaism, particularly Hellenistic Judaism. And right now I'm in between jobs. I just graduated with my PhD from FSU in Religions of Western Antiquity. That's the name of the program. And in the fall, I will be starting a 1-year visiting assistant professorship at Wake Forest teaching Jewish studies, which is really exciting.
Okay, well, congratulations. And I think this will be out in October, so you will be.
Oh, then I am currently at Wake Forest.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, do you want to take that
No,
again? Okay.
No, keep this. I think it's funnier this way.
Awesome. I agree. Okay. Well, yeah, so congratulations on both of those things, on completing the one and on having the other job. And yeah, I look forward to your time and any work that you do at Wake Forest.
Yeah,
Today,
thanks,
though,
man.
we'll be discussing your article from the Journal of Biblical Literature, Theorizing Laughter and Ethnicity in Philo's Embassy to Gaius. So this is one of those titles that it's just like there's a lot going on there to make it really interesting. Like Journal of Biblical Literature. Yeah.
That is fully thank you to the JBL. My original title was god awful. And they were like, why not this title?
Well, now I kind of want to know what your title was.
It was just like a mouthful. It was like a quote. It was the quote that I start with about like mixing accusations with mockery in Embassy to Gaius and theorize. And it was just like 17 words or something. And then one of the editors, I forget who, was just like, a lot of this title is not doing much. And they were right.
I'm imagining where like 18th century novels where the title of the chapter was like the first 2 sentences of the chapter. Yeah. Wherein Tommy Woodward exposes laughter's presence in the antiquity.
Yeah. Have you ever seen, I don't know if you do much like reading and religious studies beyond Bible stuff, but have you ever seen the John Modern book from like the mid 2010s about secularism? And the title is like an entire page. It's an incredible joke. Where he's like, I don't know, this is how Moby Dick feels. And a lot of the book is about Moby Dick. But the title is like an entire page long.
So hold on. You're reminding me of something. Okay. So my son got me this book. It's called here.
Oh.
So it's called A Pickle for the Knowing Ones by Lord Timothy Dexter. So this is like, I think, colonial or early Republic era here in the United States. And this guy wrote this thing, and somebody, I don't know, maybe George Washington or John Adams, criticized his lack of use of punctuation. And so, like, I'm holding this up. Viewers, you can see it. He ends the book, it's probably indecipherable, with just like blocks of apostrophes, question marks. So he's just like, fine, I'll make up for that deficit. That's, yeah. And I think it's just rambling nonsense. I haven't read it. It's just a little gag gift that my son gave me because he thought it was so funny. But that's immediately what that reminded him. Okay, this is a lot of fun, but I actually do want to talk about your article because I don't want people to be like, oh, so that's what this podcast is. It's just a booby trap for talking about silliness. But okay, theorizing laughter. So the letter to Gaius. So clearly, we're this is like extra biblical stuff, but it really is. One of the things I enjoy the most is that, particularly with academics, you guys kind of study around the issue or the question, and that
Hmm.
those are the conversations that I enjoy the most. So I'm okay if we don't get directly to Bible necessarily, but what is Philo's embassy to Gaius? First, can we just start there?
Yeah, so for a little Bible Connect, we can start with just a briefer on Philo. Philo was an Alexandrian philosopher, a Jewish Alexandrian philosopher in the early first century, um, who is most famous, I think, in biblical studies for his extensive commentaries on the Septuagint text of the Torah, the first five books of what became the Hebrew Bible. And he has in our extant library of Philo's works, he has three distinct, or scholars think he has three distinct commentaries on this that each have their own vibes. Um, and so he had a lot to say about the Greek language version of the Hebrew Bible, or at least the Torah. This is probably before we have anything like a canonical Hebrew Bible. Um, and so that's who Philo is. He seems to be a philosopher and educator in his day job, and then sometimes he's also a like communal leader. And Embassy to Gaius is much more him writing as a communal leader than as a philosopher or exegete, interpreter, whatever we want to call him. Um, and this text is, it seems to be in response to real riots that happened in Alexandria in the late 30s CE, probably 38 to 41 CE. And it was probably a number of discrete riots over those years. And Philo kind of treats them as one unit in his writing about it. And these riots involve specifically anti-Jewish violence done by a crowd of other Alexandrians against Jews. And this seems very likely with the historical records that we have. This is probably not something that Philo is making up. And we can guess at that because the Jewish community in Alexandria puts together their own embassy to act on behalf of the Jews of Alexandria in traveling to Rome to communicate with the emperor at the time, who was Gaius, also known as Caligula. I feel like most Americans who are not super invested in classics think of him primarily as Caligula, although I think he didn't like that nickname. So Philo mostly calls him Gaius.
Caligula it is then.
That's that's fun. Um, but so if you look in historical records, right, certain people call him Gaius more often and others Caligula more often. I think Suetonius calls him Caligula almost exclusively. Um, but so the Jews of Alexandria put together their own political embassy to go um, basically beseech Gaius to do something to stop this violence against the Jews in Alexandria. And by Philo's account, he dismisses them out of hand. He laughs at them. He makes fun of them and does nothing for them. And that's kind of where Philo's account ends in Embassy to Gaius. He basically tells the story of the riots and of a few political machinations behind the riots and in response to them, and particularly in the final third, the trip that he takes. He's part of this embassy. He takes with this embassy to Gaius. That's where he gets the title from, or where we get the title from. And that's kind of the story of it. Afterward, in the historical record, we know that Gaius's successor, Claudius, who was his uncle, Gaius gets assassinated because like a lot of people hate him. He was always going to be assassinated. If it wasn't the two people who did assassinate him, it would have been others. He was not very popular with a certain class of Romans. But so he's assassinated. His uncle becomes the new emperor, Claudius, and Claudius writes a letter to Alexandria regarding both the riots and the embassy because at that same time, a non-Jewish Alexandrian embassy also goes to Rome. And so there are two embassies claiming to represent Alexandria in the city of Rome, attempting to speak to the emperor. And Claudius takes issue with this. Claudius says that this shows that the Jews are not acting as Alexandrians, and they are acting as if there are two cities, Alexandria and Jewish Alexandria. And this seems to make him angry. He thinks that's inappropriate. But he does basically try to squash the feuds, the rivalries, and the violence in particular in Alexandria with this letter. But the letter does seem to confirm that there were two embassies, one Jewish, one not Jewish, from Alexandria, who went to speak to the Emperor Gaius around the late 30s in response to these riots. So that's probably, you know, trustworthy historical data. And Philo is filtering all of that into his own literary ends in the text, Embassy to Gaius, which is what I focus on. I mention here and there historical details in my article, but I do really focus on the literary strategies of Philo in how he's giving this information, how he's shaping his information.
So a component I do kind of want to, you haven't mentioned it specifically, but in talking about, so there's a Jewish envoy or embassy and a non-Jewish. So ethnoi or ethnicity, like should we use the word ethnoi, or is the word ethnicity, is that word doing enough work to capture how they understood what ethnoi were in antiquity?
Oh, so I use the term ethnicity mostly out of like convenience for the contemporary reader, not necessarily as a one-to-one translation of any Greek word, like ethnoi or laos or gens. Um, right, like people argue about the meaning of these words, whether they mean people, nation, race, anything like this. So I use ethnicity um, broadly as like a marker for what uh, Denise Kimber Buell calls strategies of peoplehood, where the things that we in our culture call ethnicity, race, religion, um, these all act as strategies of defining who counts as one people, who doesn't count as them, who counts as another group of people, ways of grouping people into a unit, right? And so when I say ethnicity in this, and when I say theorizing ethnicity, I mean that general strategy of peoplehood, not to say that ethnicity in antiquity acts exactly the same as ethnicity in our world, but rather to say that both are very porous and are constantly referencing other things beyond just what we think of as ethnicity. So one of Buell's points is that ethnicity, race, religion are constantly interplaying with one another in defining a people. And I point to some other scholars who make similar arguments in other contexts, particularly another excellent book from American religious history, Judith Weisenfeld's New World a Coming, where she establishes this idea of the religio-racial, as to say that right race and religion are always interplaying in the definitions of peoplehood. So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying ethnicity, right? It's our category in the contemporary world, and I think it's useful for looking at strategies of peoplehood in antiquity, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. I just want to make sure I'm using
Mhm.
it correctly. Because I don't know, particularly like in English speaking American parlance, there are so many different words, and it does kind of get difficult. So I don't know where ethnicity gets wrapped up in that, but the way we're talking about it here, it'll be so. Jews or Judeoi, that's an ethnos or an ethnicity.
Mhm.
So will you? Okay, so Jews are the ethnicity. What are some of the other I don't know, is competing the right word? Ethnicities around them in Alexandria, because it's a major metropolitan area, so it's probably
Yes.
pretty diverse, right?
Yes, the major groups relevant for Philo's discussions here are the Jewish population of Alexandria, the Egyptian population of Alexandria, and the Greek population of Alexandria, with the added difficulty that Alexandrian is often used as another term for a people, and that this is constantly being debated by our ancient sources, right? Primary sources are constantly saying these groups of people count as Alexandrian and those don't. And right, sometimes you see ancient sources using Alexandrian, and they clearly mean the Greek population of Alexandria, who had the greatest amount of power, especially at the like founding of Alexandria as a Hellenistic colonial city. And a lot of that is that they are trying to claim Alexandria as a Greek city rather than Egyptian. So if you look at like the ancient sources, they refer to Alexandria as being beside Egypt. It's not in Egypt. Um, as another way to emphasize its Greekness, its I don't know, Hellenicness. Um, and so Alexandrian really becomes a very difficult category of people to make sense of, because every source will be doing a different thing with Alexandrian as a category. And if you look in different texts of Philo, he seems to use Alexandrian different ways from one text to another. So I can't even come here and say Philo always means Egyptians when he says Alexandrians. Instead, I have to say in Embassy to Gaius, it seems clear that when Philo says Alexandrian, he means Egyptian. And there are a few details that I think support this, um, particularly that he uses very common anti Egyptian stereotypes in order to describe the people he calls Alexandrians, which to me says that when he says Alexandrian in Embassy to Gaius, he means Egyptians, right? He says that the Alexandrians worship crocodiles. This is not something that ancient audiences would have thought of as a Greek trait. They would have thought of as a stereotypical Egyptian trait. And so the main categories at play for Philo are Greeks, Egyptians, and Jews in Alexandria. And when he says Alexandrians in this text, but not all of his texts, he likely means just the Egyptian population of Alexandria. Um, Obviously, there were other types of people in Alexandria, but it seems like the three largest populations were the native Egyptians, the Greeks. By this point in time, there was a lot of intermarriage, so different people would fit into Greek or Egyptian depending on how Greek or Egyptian they were perceived to be, for various reasons. And then there was a large Jewish population in Alexandria at the time.
So okay, and well, and there's also in consideration here in what he's talking about, like Roman as an
Yes.
ethnicity. So he's speaking
And
favorably about them to contrast the
yes.
influence of Egyptians, about whom he is being uh, xenophobic. I don't know. I don't know what the right word would be.
Yeah, so it's interesting. He has a lot to say about Romans, but there were not likely very many Romans living in Alexandria. It doesn't seem like it was a big like Roman population in Alexandria at the time. Um,
But they're high status.
uh,
They have power, so it
they
doesn't
have
matter.
power. Yes, they are the imperial colonizers who come in um, during like Pompey's tour through uh, the what is it, the Eastern Mediterranean. And around that time is when Rome gets control of uh, Egypt. And right, Egypt is a very important Roman province once they gain control of it, and they extract a massive amount of supplies, particularly food. out of Egypt. And so you're right, they have a massive amount of power over Egypt, even though there are not many Romans there. And this also comes into play in Philo's presentation of all of this material, in that, in at least my understanding of the text, he is trying to flatter the Romans and suggest that Romans and Greeks share a lot in common with Jews, and they share nothing at all in common with Egyptians. And this gets into, I think you used the word xenophobic, but definitely Egyptian phobic, right? He's definitely portraying the Egyptians in extremely negative ways in this piece.
I don't know if you've read this particular article, but so Luke Timothy Johnson, and this is on the forefront of my brain because I had a conversation about anti-Semitism in the New Testament with a coworker recently,
Hmm.
and so there's this article from the 80s by Luke Timothy Johnson about how what we're seeing in the New Testament is really just there's like it's almost like one school of philosophy arguing with another one, and the argument tends to get a little bit hyperbolic.
Hmm.
So Philo, in looking out for the interests of himself and the community of Jews in the face of this, mob violence with the riots, he's appealing to the people in power, the Romans,
Mhm.
on behalf of himself and his community. And
Yes,
and he's making some determinations about another ethnic group. And this is
yes,
kind of where we get into the laughter thing, right? So like, well, the Romans laughed at us, but they only laughed at us because of this. So,
exactly.
okay, can you explain that? What does that mean?
Yeah, the laughter part of this like ethnic logic he's proposing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it might come as a shock 20 minutes into this discussion,
I was gonna
but
say that.
I actually mostly study laughter, and the only reason this piece is has such a focus on ethnicity is that when I was looking at laughter in Philo, I found this story in Embassy to Gaius that seemed to say a lot about ethnicity and politics at the time. Um, and so I'll describe kind of my research path. I was in the first stages of researching my dissertation, which is on laughter in Hellenistic Judaism and the ways that Hellenistic Jews define, describe, and ascribe like norms to laughter. Right, what laughter means, how you should laugh, how laughter works, all of these things. And so the first thing I did was just I made this huge database of every time a word for laughter is used in any text that I was familiar with. And I noticed that Embassy to Gaius had many, many, many instances of laughter, which before I started rereading it felt surprising to me because I remembered it for being a text about, ethnic violence and political machinations. Why does this have so much laughter in it? And then as I reread it and I became more familiar with how laughter works in Hellenistic Jewish texts, it started to make much more sense, right? Laughter in Hellenistic Judaism is a very antagonistic act in most cases. It's often viewed as a punishment for wrongdoing or an attack against the wrong kind of person, for instance, the wrong ethnic group or the wrong people, right? And so when you look at the Embassy to Gaius and how Philo uses laughter in it, you start to see a few common tropes, right? One is that the Jewish population of Alexandria is being laughed at by their enemies for no good reason, right? And if laughter acts as a punishment for wrongdoing or being the wrong sort of person, why would the Jews be laughed at if, in Philo's point of view, they have done nothing to earn that type of laughter? Well, we need some other explanation. And Philo's explanation is that Egyptians are cruel and animalistic, and they will lash out against others like the Jews of Alexandria with laughter as a weapon. And so he really describes Egyptians as these cruel people who want to laugh at Jews for no good reason, and who will do that unless they are stopped by a greater power. And then he ties this into all of the Gaius slash Caligula drama by suggesting that Gaius had a like an enslaved person in his court who was Egyptian named Helicon, and that Helicon is kind of this mustache twirling villain of Philo's account here, where Helicon gives this incredible monologue where he says, I'm going to mix my accusations with mockery and pour them like honey into the ears of the emperor. And through this, I will take charge of the emperor and make him my ally in attacking the Jews. And at the same time, Philo emphasizes that Gaius is very impressionable. He's not modest, and he laughs too much. He laughs really hard at mime plays. He joins in with actors, both like singing as actors do, and he seems to describe like comedic games he does with another actor who was famous at the time, Apelles. Um, and so Philo says that Gaius is this very immodest person. You can tell by the way he laughs, and he's very easily influenced. And then in his court, he has this Egyptian enslaved person, Helicon, who is manipulating him through this laughter. He's making him laugh, and by making him laugh, he's making him his own ally. And particularly the way that he makes him laugh seems to involve anti-Jewish charges, anti-Jewish accusations. And in Philo's account, this seems to trickle down into both laughter against the Jews of Alexandria and the Jews of the Roman Empire, and violence against the Jews of Alexandria. But notably, the person at fault is the Egyptian and perhaps this one Roman emperor for failing to be modest, whereas a proper Roman emperor who would be known by his modesty and his self-control, meaning not only his ability to control himself, but also his ability to not be controlled by another, that emperor would not be influenced by someone like Helicon. He would dismiss Helicon, and that would end any potential of laughter or violence aimed at the Jewish population. And so you see that his descriptions of laughter really tie into his ethnic theories, his strategies of peoplehood, back to Buell's language. And so this is what I found when I took a closer look at all of the laughter in the text, and then that's what led me to all of the parts of the interpretation and argument that I was giving before we actually got to the laughter, which is what led me there in the first place.
So I want to circle back to something that will probably only be interesting to me, and that is your database. Can you describe
yes.
your database to me?
So are you familiar with the program Notion?
No, I am not.
Oh, I mean, you do this as a side gig. Maybe one day it'll be your main gig. It's a great organizing tool, and you should, when we get off the phone today, look up Notion databases.
I will.
Because it's this wonderful program where once you learn how it works, you can kind of make databases for any number of like tasks. And so I made this database using the Notion program, where essentially I have like many columns where I can put the Greek, Hebrew, Latin, whatever language text. I can put a quick translation that I just do on the spot. I redo all my translations when I'm writing. And then I have like a ton of tags, right? So I can tag, the root word here is galoios, right? Laughable. And so anytime I'm like, how does galoios work in Hellenistic Jewish texts? I just reopen my database and I click tag galoios, and every instance comes up immediately. And I can just compare them quickly to one another. There's also tags for like thematic things, right? So if I think that a text is describing laughter as punishment, I have it there. I have tags for authors, so I can quickly look up like every time Philo mentions laughter, and I can have easy access to data like that Josephus, who we don't really think of as a laughter guy, he mentions laughter over 100 times in our four sources of his, um, which means as I'm building this database and planning my dissertation, which hopefully becomes a book one day, I end up having to be like, well, Josephus has a lot to say about laughter. I have to have a chapter on Josephus, right? So it really helped me in the first stages of building out the plans for my dissertation, and it also really makes writing much quicker, right? If I'm in the middle of a paragraph and I realize I need to explain the context for laughter as punishment, because Philo points to it here. I just look up that tag and I have like 17 options to choose from as examples. It's a really fun tool, and all of my professors were really into it. They all nerded out looking at it with me, which was fun too.
I'm trying to contain myself because I want to go nerd out over it too. As someone who I miss Microsoft Access, the functionality that had back in the day. Sometimes I would like for the podcast. Anyway, I won't look. I didn't prepare stuff for that, so I'll try to move back over. I pictured Helicon as like Wormtongue. The way that
he's a Wormtongue character for sure.
Yeah, that type, manipulative. And I realized, I don't think it occurred to me when I read the article, but like the way he's describing the derisive laughter that's aimed at the Jews is how I laugh every time I see a Cybertruck. And I'll just own it. I'll own it that I'm aligning myself with the guys who are the villains in this particular narrative. But man, okay, so laughter theory, okay, because now we are, like you said, like it took 20 minutes to get there, but I did kind of want to establish the foundational parts of the background for this. So they're being laughed at derisively. It's abusive. There's a criticism of the emperor for almost like being like another reference, King Joffrey type person. Where
you're really into the epic fantasy today.
Yeah, well, I mean, it works. So there's all these, I guess, like moral judgments of people based on laughter. Are there instances where, and I guess we'll stick to Philo, does he talk about instances of appropriate laughter in his opinion?
Oh, yes. This is, you opened a can of worms because this is essentially the final chapter of my dissertation and hopefully book one day, where Philo has way more to say about laughter than just what is in this article. He's endlessly talking about laughter, and the other main way he discusses it is in terms of the birth of Isaac, whose name in Hebrew is something like he laughs. Right, shahak or tzahak are two different Hebrew words that seem clearly connected in some way that mean laughter. And so Isaac's name is etymologically tied to laughter. And in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis, you seem to get three different explanations of this etymological link. People who care a lot about the documentary hypothesis. We are getting into biblical studies now. But people who care a lot about the documentary hypothesis will suggest that each of these three etymologies comes from a different source. I don't remember which ones are which with regards to this laughter, but one is Sarah is given the prediction. She overhears the prediction that she will become pregnant, and she laughs because that's ridiculous. She's like 90. There's a scene, I think, just before that where Abraham is given a prediction and he also laughs and falls on his face. And then there's a third one after Sarah gives birth. Some other people come and gather around her, and there's laughter in that scene as well. And so Isaac is traditionally connected to ideas of laughter. And Philo is responding to that in his commentaries. And it seems like he has some anxiety at the idea that Abraham and Sarah laugh at these divine messages of conception, of pregnancy, uh, because laughter in those instances communicates disbelief. And that's a common trope in Hellenistic Judaism. And it's likely that other Hellenistic Jewish texts that are responding to Genesis also understand the laughter of Sarah and Abraham as communicating disbelief. So Josephus cuts this entirely in Jewish antiquities. He doesn't mention that either of them laughed. Instead, Sarah smiles, and then this is why Isaac's name is laughter, which even in his Greek does not make sense. Like that sentence does not track in Greek unless you're assuming that laughter and smiling are the same. But then why change it to smiling in the first place? So there seems to be this anxiety about Sarah and Abraham laughing at this divine message that they will have a child. And Philo comes in and does what I would describe as like exegetical acrobatics in order to show that this is not actually laughter from disbelief. Instead, their laughter comes from two places. One, an experience of pure joy, right? He says that laughter is when your soul is so elated that the excess escapes out of the body. And so they are so happy to learn that they will bear a child that the excess of joy bestowed upon their spirit like escapes out of their mouth as a giggle. And then the other thing is that they're laughing to communicate that this miracle should be unbelievable, because miracles are unbelievable, but that they themselves believe it, right? That it's simultaneously a way to communicate that they know that this is impossible, and that they're glad that this impossible thing really is happening to them. And so every time he mentions this, and this comes up many, many times in Philo's commentaries, anytime he mentions this, that is a positive form of laughter. But I think it's noteworthy that he seems to be maybe accidentally communicating an anxiety that at its root, this was not a positive form of laughter. This was a derogatory laugh against an angel who said something stupid, like my 90-year-old wife or my 90-year-old self will become pregnant.
Yeah, that always just seemed pretty straightforward to me. But on the topic of
wait, have you read much of Philo's commentaries?
No, I have not. Yeah.
Straightforward is not often the word I would give to them. They are amazing and I love them. I have become a Philo bro in the past few years, but straightforward is not really his mode.
Okay. Yeah, look, I mean, they're not out as of the recording that we're doing today, but there've been a couple of episodes. So there's one on prosopological exegesis, and like going into it, before we started recording, Kyle Hughes, I told him like, look, a lot of this doesn't sit well with me. I have a lot of trouble with this. So, I feel like he was like, okay, let's hear it. What's your issue with it? And I know that's not, that's not necessarily what Philo's doing isn't the same thing, but it is like Philo and Origen, the kind of interpretive things where it's very figurative interpretation. It doesn't sit well with the, evangelical, mostly historical, critical understanding of biblical text that I have. So it's, I just kind of have a predilection for, I don't know, that makes me uncomfortable, but it is fun to engage with and learn more about it.
Have you ever engaged with Stanley Fish and the idea of interpretive communities?
No, I have not.
So you might look into this. I think it's maybe a fun way to create some distance, if that is causing you like extra cognitive uh,
So, I mean, I
I
will
don't know,
say
work.
we were talking about it before we started. The conversation I had with Stanley Hauerwas was about an essay he wrote on Watership Down. So I am definitely open because his whole thing was like Watership Down is an example of story form community, and this is what like Christians should see themselves as a part of. And so I am definitely open to that way of thinking. But I
Mhm.
guess it's just some of the specific. I don't know. It's hard for me to see that as exegesis, right? That you're reading out of the text, and I think
Mm.
I don't know. Exabatics or acrogesis might be. I love portmanteaus, so if I can make one, I'll make one. But that like yeah, that seems man, you're doing that's a lot of contortion to try and get somewhere. But to that point, a thing that I keep coming back to is like uh, whether it's an individual or communities engaging with biblical text is necessarily negotiating with that text and with one another. And that's an interesting thing. Laughter,
Mhm.
though, okay, so I know that this is one of those I'll know it when I see it kind of things, and like, oh, why do academics have to why do they have to turn it into do more analysis on something that we all experience? And on a certain level, I'll say like, yeah, it is so common. What is the benefit of an academic theorization or evaluation of laughter, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a fun question. And for whatever reason, I was not really expecting it. So for me, the looking at the theorization of laughter, which is what I imagine myself doing, what I think my job as a scholar right now is, for me, like analyzing the theorization of laughter is like analyzing the theories of anything, a way to bring attention to subjectivation, right? To which comes from like Foucault's language, right? And the idea that right, our social worlds form so much about ourselves and how we act and how we think, right? And that for me, the most interesting way to get at subjectivation is to look at things that we think are quotidian, are daily, are natural, are reflective, right? So in our contemporary world, we often describe laughter as a reflective or reflexive phenomenon, right? There is a funny stimulus and it makes you laugh. The vast majority of our theories of laughter in the contemporary world are ones of response or reflex, right? The incongruity theory of laughter is particularly popular at the moment, and this is the idea that an incongruous stimulus, any thing, any object or event or experience that is um, counter to one's expectations makes that person laugh. And so this is imagining again a a stimulus that causes a person to laugh. You see this also in the superiority theory, right? That the experience of feeling superior to to another makes you laugh, right? So this is I think you laughing at the Cybertruck. Um, or the audience of John Oliver laughing when he plays like that clip of Trump saying that two airplanes probably won't hit each other in the air because two golf balls almost never hit each other in the air. And we all get to feel superior to the president when we laugh at that.
So you're a regular watcher because that's this last week's episode.
That is like a few days ago, yeah. Which also is a fun timestamp since this comes out in 4 months.
It's still out on YouTube. That's not a big deal.
That's so true.
Look, I know the
Um,
things that make me laugh the hardest, honestly, since high school, are the things where mostly sketch comedy, but
mm,
where I start to wonder like what was it like when you pitched that joke? And one comes to mind from like in the last 2 years. It was this guy quits his job and his wife is panicking and he's like I can just draw Mario. And well, yeah,
what?
it's so stupid, but it reminded me. I think I'm on the cusp of jokes that are written in popular humor are. I'm 42, so I'm probably about less than 10 years away from. They won't be written for any reference that I get anymore.
Mm,
But that is one that, as a kid, like that sounds like something that a boy would have said when I was in elementary school. It's just like,
uh-huh.
look how good I am at drawing Mario, and so if I can picture like the scene when someone is pitching this to a room full of people, like,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember it, but like Jack Black is your host and you're pitching this. They they had, sorry, now I'm just going on. They had one when Jack Black hosted where it was like a community jam band thing. So they're just like, just bring your instruments and come on up. And everybody that came up was a bass player. And not being a musician, but having had a lot of friends who are musicians since I was in high school, that is absolutely the kind of thing that would have bummed all of them out. Is if they thought like, "Oh man, we're just gonna play," and then you show up and everybody's got a bass, and then you get to the point where there's more bass players than there were amps, and it's like, nah, it's fine, man. I brought my own, and like, just the reputation that bass players have. So, listeners, I'm really sorry. I'm not cutting that out. I really enjoyed that, but so yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different reasons to laugh, and like superiority and derision is one. Sometimes even, what would be a low status reason that one would laugh? Do you think?
Oh, wait,
So derision is
like
since like you're high status, if or you perceive yourself to be high status. Is there something on the other end where you see yourself as low status?
in our world or in the ancient world? In the ancient world, no. In the ancient world, you're either being laughed at or you're laughing with a peer. There is no other way. If you are below in a social hierarchy, you are being laughed at. And this is one of the reasons why so many high status writers of antiquity hate actors, because actors place themselves in that lower position to be laughed at. Um, and to basically receive abuse professionally, and by choice, right? And so there's not really a sense of like a way to make people laugh that does not harm oneself, right? If I'm making you laugh, I am facing abuse from your laughter, right? But there is some discussion of like shared cooperative laughter among peers. It is just extremely rare, right? At least in the Hellenistic Jewish texts, which is where I focus, right? So you have in like First Esdras, there's a description of like an idealized marriage where I think it's she smiles and he laughs, which is also like beautifully gendered and bizarre to our ears, or at least to mine. Um, but it obviously seemed like a clear description of an ideal marriage to whoever was writing that bit of First Esdras. Um, so there's things like that, but the vast majority of laughter in Hellenistic Judaism is antagonistic, and it is tied up with this idea of laughing down.
So she smiles and he laughs. Is that she's subtle and he's more overt? Is that what that's depicting there?
I think it's something like that, where there is this idea in Jewish texts of the time that uh, the more audible, the louder a laugh is, the less modest it is. Um, there is this idea. You see this in like Ben Sira and possibly in the community rule of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and in a few other places as well.
So, uh, in thinking about like a low status point of view,
Mhm,
mocking a high status point of view in the ancient world, and I understand this did not originate from the ancient world, but I think I'm picturing something like Life of Brian, which
mm,
does kind of carry like a catch 22. Like, look at how ridiculous the powerful people are and the rules that they make. But you're saying,
mhm.
at least as we have evidence, there's no such thing as that in
Oh,
antiquity.
well, the key to that is that it's producing a superiority even if it goes against the actual hierarchy. So you have things like Lucian, who's a like Greek language Syrian author who writes these dialogues in the second century um, CE. He writes these like very funny dialogues, these satirical dialogues. And interestingly, in one, the dialogue is essentially the main character whose name sounds a lot like Lucian. Um, he's selling all of these philosophies um, as slaves at a market. And he's making fun of essentially the founders of each of these philosophical movements. Right. So Diogenes is on sale and he makes a joke about how stupid that is. And particularly he makes fun of philosophy itself by suggesting that the dumbest philosophies are sold for the highest prices. Um, and so this is a way for Lucian to claim superiority to the people who literally have more followers and more power than he does. And then he also writes a sequel to this, a meta sequel, where those those philosophers come back from the dead and they put him on trial for besmirching the name of philosophy herself. And then if you pay close attention in that piece, he also suggests that philosophy is an idiot and can be easily flattered. And he flatters philosophy and these philosophers until they just choose not to kill him. And he gets off scot free, even though like the reader knows or the audience knows he's a liar. Right. So this is a way for him to claim superiority and laugh at these other figures. Um, Even though in reality they would have had power over him, right? So like superiority doesn't need to be a stable concept. It can be something that is negotiated and claimed for a moment and let go of.
Okay, that makes sense. I I don't know why, and I'm just throwing another personal prejudice out there. When you were talking about that, I was picturing where I just listened to an audiobook biography of Ayn Rand, and I was
Oh God.
yeah, which was a lot of sighing from me, just like, guys, you're in a cult. What are you doing here? And yeah, it's just so cheap and ridiculous, and she would have thrived in the internet age. So I was like, yeah, she would have gone for a pretty penny in that auction. Yeah, sorry, I have I have not been very focused in this conversation, but we
No, it's
have
better this way.
laughed a lot,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's what matters. So, as far as the article goes, though, and
Uh-huh.
and I do apologize. What was there anything that you were hoping I would ask about that I didn't ask about? So you could just say, yeah, my whole article.
No, I feel like we covered most of the important bits.
You did.
People can go and find it and read it. They could ask me about
People,
it.
oh man, people can come directly to me when they hear this podcast and learn nothing. Okay. Well, what what would you recommend? And obviously, there's a lot of footnotes in the article itself, but what would you recommend for listeners to read, listen to, watch to get a better understanding of like academic study of laughter in general, but then also
Mm.
as it applies to antiquity?
Mary Beard, Laughter in Ancient Rome. That is like bar none the best book on laughter, and particularly the best book in antiquity. I cite it all up and down this article. I basically can't write more than 10 pages of anything about laughter in antiquity without citing her. So I would say number one, Mary Beard, Laughter in Ancient Rome. And then number two, Stephen Hallowell, Greek Laughter, which is a bit older. I think Mary Beard's book is from 2015, and Hallowell's book is from 2008.
Hers is from
And
2014. I didn't catch his.
there we go. Um, Stephen Hallowell, Greek Laughter is the name of it. And this is a huge book. as like a doorstop. I have no idea how one person wrote it. Um, and it's another incredible book and has tons and tons of primary source work. If you're wanting to get a sense of the patterns of laughter in the ancient world, his is focusing on texts in the Greek language. So he starts with Homer and he ends with like Lucian and early Christian writers like John Chrysostom. Um, and then her book is focusing on the late Roman Republic and the early Roman Empire, um, regardless of language. But neither of them discuss much with regards to Jewish sources, which is good for me because that means that I can say that my book fills a gap.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's good. And I hope, yeah.
I just love making fun of the ways that academics talk about their work. Like nobody would read those books and be like, "Oh, well, there's a gap here. We need someone to come fill this gap."
I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily true. You're saying that.
Sure, but I'm also justifying my job.
That's okay though. You're allowed to want to be employed. You have done much more to be employed in this field than I have, or pretty much anyone listening. So yeah, take a deep breath, man. Don't let's, at least one of us should be a fan of yours, and it should be more likely to be you. No, I enjoyed the article, and I have genuinely enjoyed talking to you. And so with the dissertation, when everything's done with that, or if you want to wait till it's published, I would love to have you back on to talk even more about this stuff. So I like the last question to be, what do you read for fun? But what but hold on, but we're going to bridge it. Okay. So have that in the back of your head. What if I said, hey, we're going to hang out for a week and I want your ideal comedies, whether it's shows or movies or whatever, stand up. What are you going to show me?
So it's on my mind because I recently, for my birthday, made like 20 of my best friends watch this movie, but Hundreds of Beavers, which came out last year. Do you know this film at all?
I'd never heard of it.
It's a super independent, like slapstick, live action silent comedy just made by like I think a group of friends in Wisconsin or something. And it is like it's essentially like what if you made a silent film with like the logic of a 90s video game. And the premise is just this guy in like maybe late 1700s, like the area that we now know as Wisconsin, or like maybe even into parts of Canada. In that rough area, this guy he really wants to marry this this woman that he meets at an outpost, and the dowry is hundreds of beavers. And so it's just him hunting hundreds of beavers, and all of the beavers are just humans in these cheap mascot outfits. And it is outrageously funny. It's incredible. Everyone needs to watch it.
And you just had that right there in the chamber, ready to go.
I made 20 of my best friends watch this like weeks ago, and half of them were like, "This is the greatest movie ever," and the other half were like, "Why did you do this?"
So you shrunk your friend group down? Is that what you're telling me? You halved your friend group?
Look, it is what it is.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. No, that's not. Look, hey, man, and that's the thing about comedy, right? Is that there are people that I know who will insist that movies I don't think hold up. Like, I think I was 10 when Ace Ventura came out, and like, yeah, I don't think I could stomach it now. But that movie.
Oh yeah, I mean that one has a specific political reason behind it, though.
Oh, well, no, I mean there's a lot of I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could stomach the energy, is what I'm saying. Just
gotcha.
What I remember of the energy.
Wait, one more of like 90s. Like, how did this age? I recently watched Clifford for the first time. Do you know this film? Martin Short, Charles Grodin.
Yeah.
I had never seen this. This is the most demented movie I've ever seen in my life. I've become obsessed with it. I think about it every day. It is the funniest thing that I've ever seen. I watched it just alone in my house and I like fell off my couch laughing at it. Um if you like your comedies demented and you think it's funny when people are mean to each other, I highly recommend the film Clifford, where a 40-year-old Martin Short plays an evil 9-year-old who is terrorizing his dirtbag uncle, played by Charles Grodin.
Yeah, which I don't I don't think I realized that like Charles Grodin is just always a curmudgeon.
Oh, he sucks in every movie. He's so
In
funny.
everything, like Beethoven, yeah, he's just like he's there.
Heartbreak Kid.
Yeah, but Martin Short, I don't know. The older I've gotten, the more I appreciate Martin Short, for
He's
sure.
incredible. I'm obsessed with Jiminy Glick.
Oh, okay. Okay, you know what? I don't think I brought this up before, but like, I will walk my dogs before interviews. Not every interview, but a lot of them, and I'll be running through
Uh-huh.
questions. And the voice that I have in my head for myself as an interviewer that I wish I could do. I wish I could do a passable Jiminy Glick. It's just like, tell me, Woodward, what why do you write about laughter? I just the, particularly, and I may link it in the show notes. His interview with Larry David, who is just like always cantankerous, also a curmudgeon, and
Hmm.
it does not have like the friendly, inviting energy that everyone else has with Jiminy Glick.
Yeah.
And he just like pushes back, and so it's like one person mocking someone and the other person being openly aggressive. Oh man, yeah,
It's
Jiminy Glick.
great.
Jiminy Glick is great. Okay, so, I'll say this. Look, nobody asked, but I'll just throw this out there. It has become apparent to me after having watched it like 6 times in just over a year, all the way through. 30 Rock is my favorite TV show. It
It's
just
incredible.
it, some of the best joke writing that's ever been on TV. And I know there's a video breaking down this one joke that contains several jokes where they flash back to Jenna and Liz doing improv when they were younger. And the prompt is a dinner date with Oprah and Sling Blade. and, and Liz
I can
says,
still hear the way
yeah,
Tina Fey says the French fried potatoes
I sure
thing.
do love these French fried potatoes. And then Jenna says, "No, you don't, Oprah."
Oprah.
Oh man. Oh my, and that's I would say that's like the ground floor for the humor on that show. Yeah. No, what like
No, that
Jackass?
is such a good joke. Wait, 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 real quick. So that gets into the yes and rule. I don't know if you noticed in this article, I have to cite a source to explain what yes and is because my advisor did not know what this phrase was and I use it in the body. He was like, what does this mean? And so I had to find a source. And then when I was fact checking this as it was being proved, that source had died. So I had a dead blue link and I had to find a second source to explain what yes and is.
Hold on, the link died or the source died?
The link died,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh man, that's a bummer. That may be just a generational thing too.
I guess, but I thought it was so funny that he was like, you need to cite a source here. And so I did, and then the link died.
We were watching a cooking show called Yes Chef, which is
Hmm.
Jose Andres and Martha Stewart are the judges on this show, right? And one of the chefs, they made a reference. They said, "You are the weakest link," and I had to pause it to explain to my son that that was a reference to a thing. And then we went down a rabbit hole, finding out that when my wife mentioned that Colin Jost had been a contestant on that show, Colin Jost, yeah, you could go look it up. You can see baby Colin
Whoa,
Jost with his Harvard T-shirt or whatever it is. Um,
great.
sorry. Um, yeah, I love 30 Rock. Jack asks Liz, "What's the name of the black kid from Community?" And she says, Donald Glover, because he used to be a writer on their show.
Hmm.
What do you read for fun?
So since I defended my dissertation, it's been vacation time. I read Moby Dick for the first time. I'll shout out just three books because I've been reading a lot recently. Moby Dick is actually one of the greatest books I've ever come across. It's so much weirder than its reputation is. Everyone should check it out. It's full of whale facts, and the main character keeps referring to himself as his best friend's wife. I love this book. Um, and then a recent book. I love horror novels. So I recently read the new Stephen Graham Jones book, The Buffalo Hunter, which is magnificent. And it's got a lot of ideas about religion and belief and race. So if you're interested in the type of stuff that I was talking about in this, and you have a stomach for horror novels, I would highly recommend it. It is quite gross though. Shout out to Stephen Graham Jones. Like, if he went serious and stopped making books where, like vampires rip off people's heads, like I think he would be hailed as like a literary genius, but he just likes using all of that energy to come up with more and more grotesque ways to kill characters. And he's a legend for that. And then right now I'm diving back into Discworld, the Terry Pratchett like fantasy comedy series. Right now I'm reading Small Gods for the first time, which is very silly. And I love Pratchett. He's a favorite.
He's so good. So good.
Hmm.
Yeah, man, I love Terry Pratchett. He's one. I'm taking my time. I started probably 10 years ago on Discworld, and it's kind of
Mm,
stalled. I have some of them are still up here, and I have like one at work and two on my nightstand.
mm.
He just, yeah, he seems like this really generous and complicated man who did a really cool thing. Yeah, no, I look
And that
forward.
he just wanted to make good jokes.
I think so, but they're also remarkably human. Not the jokes
Mm, yeah, yeah,
themselves
yeah.
necessarily, but the stories and the characters. And he had this very large world that developed over time. And it's unfortunate that more of his stuff didn't get made into something for a visual medium. But there is
Hmm.
an adaptation of the Color of Magic,
Mm.
and then Going Postal, and then a couple of other things. He was really
Yeah,
resistant
I've
though.
never seen any of the adaptations.
They are on for sure. A couple of them are on Peacock, so
Gotcha.
they're out there. Yeah, sorry. I would make. You know what? I'll throw this your way. I would say if you're into that, I don't, man. Uh, Adrian Tchaikovsky has a series. I think it's Tyrant Philosophers, that
Mm.
deals with some of the, so in the vein of Small Gods and some of the way that deity is represented there. He does that. It's a little more serious. It's not quite as funny, but it blends war and class and colonization and all of these other things. And
It's another fantasy series.
it's a fantasy series, yeah. And
Sick.
he sat down with me to talk about that, and that should be out in August. And yeah, so
Always be plugging.
always be, well, yeah, always be plugging. What, 2 months later? Yeah. So, guys, if you're listening to this the day that it comes out, go back in 2 months ago and listen to my conversation with Adrian Tchaikovsky. Okay, I won't eat up any more of your time. Tommy Woodward, this was so much fun. You are welcome back anytime to talk about anything you want, but for sure, I'll be ready to laugh and have a good time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
All right, man. Take care. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Next week on the podcast, I have two guests, Garrick Allen and Kimberly Fowler, and we will be discussing their Journal of Biblical Literature article, The Story of Codex H. So this is a text critic, text reception episode. So, dial in to focus in on what these folks have to say. This is very interesting. This is biblical texts that make up biblical texts. The overall knowledge and acquired data and understanding that it takes to put together the published volume that you may have on your shelf, known as the Bible. It takes a lot of work, and it's not just translation. It's the critical text, Greek or Hebrew, that the scholars are using to make the translation, which is developed from people like Garrick and Kimberly, who find and process and understand and analyze texts like Codex H. So you can hear this conversation now for $5 a month over on Patreon. And you also won't have to hear me make this pitch because I cut all of this stuff out. So for $5 a month, if you want to hear this now, go on over to Patreon. The link is in the show notes. And yeah, if you get a chance to love someone, you should take it.
Kim and I were working on a larger project together that was funded by the UK government on this manuscript in particular, as a number of unique features in history that we wanted to explore further, but also this broader tradition that it was a part of the Euthalian tradition, which is this set of prefaces and lists and cross-references and things like this that exist in over 600 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament that very few people have worked with ever. So we wanted to sort of map that. So this is our sort of attempt to tell the story of Codex H the best we can, at least back, kind of walk backward from where its pages are today back to, the 10th century for sure, and try to start to push beyond that and think about why the history of one of, many thousands of copies of the Greek New Testament matters for what it is we do more broadly.
Yeah, and since we started by talking about textual criticism, I'll use that as a sort of jumping off point here as well. It is very, very important, and it underpins much of the scholarship that we do in the New Testament. But for a lot of us, what we are also, in some cases, more interested in, but also interested in, is the role that individual artifacts, individual manuscripts play in the New Testament's history. And that means not just paying attention to what the physical text says and whether it's different to what another manuscript's text says, and therefore what this might tell us about the text or the original text or anything like that, but actually what these items can tell us individually about the people who read them, the people who produced them, what that means for developing interpretations of the New Testament. And so with this article, we wanted to use Codex H, this manuscript that we've really focused on in our project, as Garrick says, as a case study, and to be able to give it its own story, really, and think about it in its own right, not as an example of the Pauline text. So yes, Paul's letters is what we have in the text, but we were less interested in that text as text. We all know what Paul says, and that's great and fine, and there are lots of questions about it. But for us, we were more interested in this as an artifact, as an item, and what that can tell us about New Testament textual history and interpretation and preservation as well.